Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Orchestrator meeting. So, looking at the other pad, we have. I guess let's start with NFS, right? Let's start with NFS and have a look at the other interesting topics later on. So, NFS. We have a puzzle. We have a puzzle with lots of different modules, lots of different restrictions, lots of different requests, and we are here to find a solution, or to find a way forward for OpenStack, right? So where are we? We have we have the dashboard module. That's great as it is, but it's supposed to make use of the new NFS module that is not completely that's not feature complete by now. I think it can get far, and I've learned a few things in the last few hours. But I think LGW NFS, for example, is still missing from the NFS module. We have the cfdm module, and we have the requirement that we have to kind of deploy ganesha independently of cfdm. So, yeah. Now what?
Hey Seb, I guess we can start with the configuration tracker that we have, because it's mostly related to the use case we are going to cover with Manila, and the reason why the Manila team need this kind of configuration for Ganesha, which is supposed to work the same way we did with Ansible. So I pasted in the chat the tracker, basically. The other use case is the independent Ganesha deploy with cfdm. In that case, we are already able to create this big JSON file containing the Ganesha conf and deploying this component. But we have different pieces in OpenStack, like Peacemaker for HA, and I think right now it's problematic moving from this model to the new HA NFS approach provided by cfdm. I think it could be a long-term solution according to the plan the Manila team has upstream. But for now, the idea and the purpose of these two trackers that we have is to reach feature parity with what we did with Ceph Ansible. So I don't know if Tom or Victoria want to explain the use case, the reason why need this kind of configuration and these requirements for cfdm, and the potential problems. Sure.
I can make a couple of remarks. When Ganesha was introduced as a gateway for OpenStack to CephFS, there was no independent HA support. So we developed a pacemaker support, and the way it was done was to integrate it with the pacemaker control that OpenStack does. This also provided a virtual IP on a separate network than the Ceph public network, which was essential for a large number of our use cases where tenants are not trusted and should not have access to storage infrastructure. We never wanted this to be the long-term solution. And back in as late as 2019, we were imagining a future where we didn't know about cfdm. We did know about Ceph, and we were imagining a future where a Ceph cluster would be, I'll use the word loosely, orchestrated by Ceph, and the consumers wouldn't be containers per se, at least, but would be OpenStack clients. And then that we had a little bit of momentum forward on that, but that for a variety of reasons, which we don't really need to go into here, that did not materialize for what downstream we would call RHCS. It was the emphasis was entirely on for container storage. So we have been kind of sitting with the original interim architecture. And it's not that we want to sit on it forever. So when we ask for backwards compatibility here, we do want to move forward, but we need to do something that handles what we have today and will handle an upgrade path and so on. So it was a very pleasant surprise to me to find, because we had not been particularly synchronized, to find that Ceph Atom, without Ceph, will have roughly the same features that we were desiring. So we do want to move to that. And by that, what I mean is not only will it have Jeff Layton's NFSHA work, which may not be entirely here, so I see some other people working on it too, which we were aware of and tracking out of the side of our eye. But also something roughly, I'll call it I think Sebastian phrased it this way, a Kubernetes ingress without Kubernetes. Which is a critical feature for us. Then how we expose it into OpenStack networking and so on has to get worked out. But I mean, that's the critical feature, is that you have HA that will survive failure of nodes, not just restart, within a process within a node when there's failure. But also that there's a VIP in front of it that we can expose to OpenStack, and that be separate from the Ceph public network, which we call storage network and so on. So that's, as I understand it, work that's happening fairly rapidly and is in progress. That's all delightful. I do want to align with that and move to it. But in the meantime, we have to support what we have now with Ceph Ansible. And in that model, irrespective of whether the Ceph cluster is deployed by OpenStack or is deployed independently of OpenStack and we point to it from OpenStack, we run the Ganesha daemon under OpenStack. Run it, so OpenStack's responsible for its life cycle. It's responsible for the service VIP, for migrating that VIP between nodes in the case of failure and stuff like that. So we're going to have, I think, unless there's some miracle I don't understand, we have to support that model for OSP 17.0 GA, even if we get creative with minor releases and backports and so on. I don't know, but that's my working assumption. All the feature, we do stuff in Manila itself, not just in OOO, for the HA model that we have now and stuff, and all the feature development for any upstream was supposed to be done in the last cycle. That's when we, for example, we cut over to CephFS subvolumes. So we have been doing work to try to stay pace, but we're not doing work in that release to adapt to this model. So that's what I'm running on, but I just want to register, first of all, it's not for lack of appreciation of the new stuff that you're doing that we're saying, look, we need a backwards compatibility path. And we understand it's ugly and we'd like to get rid of it as soon as reasonable. Okay, I've said enough, I think, for right now.
So my my sense is that there are a couple things to work out. One, just to make sure that we understand exactly what the long-term view is, where we're going to end up, and that everything is going to fit together properly. So we should just sort that out, make sure everything is okay there. And then we want the very minimum, the absolute minimum we can do to make the short-term situation work. And then we need some sort of migration path from the short-term to the long-term that may involve some mid-term architecture, but hopefully be a jump straight to the long-term architecture.
Right, and that's exactly right. And I haven't thought through exactly what number 3 would be, and that's part of why I don't see it as some kind of miracle enabling us to remove the compatibility path in the meantime. Is that we have to actually work that through and test it and everything else. But yes, I agree with all 3 points.
Okay. So can we talk about what the long-term view is really quick, just to make sure it makes sense? So manager NFS module has these Ceph NFS export commands to like create and delete exports. Is that something that you would expect Manila to be consuming, or would it be directly reading and writing the export objects like it is now?
I think Manila allows access to clients, and when it allows access to clients today, it uses the mechanisms dbus, but it effectively reconfigures Ganesha and gives it something like a SIG hub to get it to not shut down, but make the export and run with it. So I think we need some mechanism like that, because Manila user, the owner of a share, needs to be able to say, let me expose it to Sage's VM. Now, so that could be through a REST interface, manager interface, whatever.
If you use this manager module interface, it will do that for you, right? It'll update it basically writes the export object for you or deletes it or whatever, and it wakes up the daemon and makes sure it reloads. That would probably be if we make sure this interface supports all the things you need to put in exports, whether it's like network and authentication.
I think that's, I mean, in some sense, we're happy to do whatever that will achieve the same functionality. And, the original vision we were talking about a couple of years ago appears to be more or less what you're implementing now, which is Ganesha will run as part of the CephFS cluster, and we will interact with it via an API, and just the way we would interact with a external net app or something like that. And, that's just fine. It just needs to be a dynamic export update, and it needs to not involve any service downtime. Ganesha's in the data path, so we can't shut down the process and restart it. And we had a brief conversation with Barsha, which she said she thinks that's feasible. The original motivation for the dbus mechanism was that there was not, at the time at least, a feasible alternative to that for the dynamic update, as we understood it.
Okay, and I guess the last part was that if cfdm is managing the NFS daemon and the ingress service, the only real parameter for ingress, 2 parameters are placement, like which sets of nodes you want it to be deployed on. Well, you want it to go on like 2 or 3 of them or whatever for HA purposes, and then what virtual IP you want it to bind to and port. Is that sufficient? Like
right.
If you just tell Ceph, I want it to be on these 2 nodes, or one of these 2 nodes, this virtual IP, is that then OpenStack can be responsible for setting up the networking so that it gets attached to the SDN or whatever it is?
Yes, I think so. And I will rely partly on John and Francesco and so on in terms of, but if OpenStack has isolated networks for storage, which connects to the Ceph public and storage NFS, and that's already deployed in OpenStack, and it's a matter of wiring via VLAN or whatever into the Ceph cluster, that should just work, I think. Now, I'll add the stretch goal here. Originally, we wanted to be able to deploy multiple Ganesha clusters and put them on different VIPs, and that would be yet a further step. And I've not thought through how we were going to use Courier because it was Kubernetes. But we would eventually we want to not paint ourselves in a corner relative to moving towards that kind of picture as it becomes possible.
And that's also possible with that NFS. You can delete multiple clusters, and the exports you assign to whichever cluster you want. You can give them a different IP
and then
and which nodes.
Yeah. And then, okay, perfect. And then in terms of the parameter that controls the scheduling or placement of the Ganesha servers, we're always going to want more than one as a minimum requirement, just because we have to deploy with HA. In some sense, correct me, John, Francesco, Julio, from our point of view, we just as soon run them, if there's no downside to it, on as many nodes as reasonable, because we want to scale out. Whether that actually makes sense in terms of running lots of Ganeshas pointing at through the same MDS or something like that, I don't know. But I'm just saying, we don't really care, except that we need HA, and ideally we'll scale out as well as possible. Because one of the disadvantages of our current deployment is that we're concentrating everything on these controller nodes. Sorry, John.
Yeah, that's no problem. So currently everything we're doing, we have triple O's composable services, which lets you put different services on different nodes any way you want. We're basically translating that with triple O into a Ceph Atom spec, right? So if we're going to have the ability to put a node in a service wherever via that spec, then that's totally fine, including connecting in the appropriate network, which the user can define as many networks as they want as well. So I would think we would do the same thing to achieve that first goal. And then for the stretch goal, that's trickier, but it doesn't sound like Ceph ADM has a limitation on the second goal. It's more of a how to say that in triple O. But so far, so good.
Well, John, and actually the vision, and we can talk about this, was that for that stretch goal, triple O would not actually affect the life cycle, would not control the life cycle of these NFS clusters. It would be Manila directly. So it's dynamic. You would dynamically spin them up as you have a new tenant. So that way we could, and then we would network them back to the tenants directly. That was the vision, and we can talk about it. We can even shift the goal if we need to, but I mean, just for historical purposes at least, you can do that kind of thing with, say, an external NetApp appliance or a Dell appliance. Is you give each tenant its own virtual server and its own dedicated network path, and you control the life cycle of the daemons by Manila, because Manila knows when you have new tenants, rather than triple O, which is a deployment time or maybe day 2, but
Yeah, I can see why that would be much nicer. Maybe we can cover that more in the future.
Okay, I think that one is tricky, because that means that Ceph ADM wouldn't be responsible for running Ganesha daemons in that framework, right? We would manage the configuration.
Manila would call into Ceph ADM instead of
right. But in this case, that when Ceph ADM is running Ganesha, it's creating containers on the host. But if you want the Ganesha daemon to run in a virtual machine somewhere, that's a whole nother story.
Perhaps I shouldn't use I didn't actually mean that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think I said you get your own virtual server, but all I mean by that is you get your own Ganesha cluster. Each tenant gets a dedicated Ganesha cluster and networking that's isolated directly to those tenants.
Yeah.
Consuming VMs.
So that works. I think the thing to watch out for that would be hard for us to support would be a situation where somebody else is orchestrating the Ganesha daemons themselves, but we're still managing all the configuration of the exports and whatever. It's doable, but it's just not something that we currently are like thinking about.
Right, and that I don't. I want us to give up management of the Ganesha life cycle, and to the extent. So as a goal, that's where we want to go. The problem is the hitch is in the short term. I think we need to keep it for a little bit, or keep a way to do it still. But I'm shifting subject and not trying to steer us back to the short-term point. But that's the problem.
Okay. Can I just make sure I understand what this point is right here on line 78, where it says dynamically deploy Ganesha, not O. So Manila, I think Manila isn't in control of deployment, right? In the long-term goal. Right? Manila is telling cfdm to do it.
Yeah, cfdm controls the deployment, but it's not O that instructs cfdm, but it's Manila directly that instructs cfdm, right? If I understood that correctly.
Yeah, from an OSP point of view, we think we're in charge. From your point of view, we're asking you, will you do it, please? And it's Manila asking, Manila asking cfdm to do it per tenant. Manila knows that there's a new tenant saying, please spin me up a new Ganesha cluster.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
Yeah, I think so.
It's not actually spawning it. The Ganesha processes. Manila's not doing it. OO's not doing it. So, but Manila knows that it needs to be done. We have a new OpenStack tenant wanting shares, so Manila will trigger this.
Right. So instead of below calling cfdm, Manila is, and OO's role is reduced. But that's the future goal, and I wonder how we'll do that. But it sounds like, in theory, cfdm should be able to support that. I just worry about the tenant boundaries and other OpenStack stuff we can talk about, Tom.
Okay.
I mentioned this further goal more as not that everything about it needs to be designed or understood, but I do think that if we keep it in mind, we can try to do things that don't foreclose it.
I'm sorry, which future goal is this?
The future goal of Manila asking cfdm to bring up a new Ganesha cluster for a new tenant.
But
yeah, I think that falls into the long-term category. I think that's something that we'll support.
We were talking about a short-term and then a long-term, and now it seems we have like long-term, like extra long-term, which sounds more like what you're talking about. And I think what we want to worry about is getting off the short-term solution and getting into using cfdm's NFS deployed the way cfdm would like to do it, the new nice way. And then this other matter of having Manila versus OO calling cfdm is like a third step. So
I mean, I think everything you've just described, including that long-term spinning up a Ganesha cluster per tenant, is something that like we already support or will support. Like we have some cleanup to do here with the manager NFS module, but we're not that far away. So you'll be able to spin up multiple clusters. Okay, so shifting back to the other end of the spectrum, just to make sure I understand what happens today. So currently, Manila orchestrates the Ganeshas, pacemaker, and Manila manages the Rados objects that have all the Ganesha configs in them, and Manila reloads.
I think the current implementation is still that the Ganesha conf is physically modified, right? Containing the exports?
Oh, manages Ganesha.conf.
Yeah, so OOO via pacemaker. O really, pacemaker controls the life cycle of the Ganesha daemons today. Not the exports, but the life cycle. The HA, the initial startup, the migration, the VIP, the service interface. Manila does not control that today. Pacemaker does, and Pacemaker's deployed by O at deployment time. Manila controls the exports. So Ganesha comes up without any exports in its configuration.
Okay, so just to be clear, I understand.
Manila,
So O is telling Ceph Ansible to deploy Ganeshas with Pacemaker.
Yes, the role of Ceph Ansible during the deployment is just creating this configuration and avoid starting containers. Then Pacemaker adopt the systemd units and manage the lifecycle of these containers, starting them according to the virtual IP selected. So basically, Ceph Ansible for both internal Ceph and external Ganesha just creates the first configuration file according to the parameters specified, and then leave
right,
the
it
world
makes
as
the
it
Ganesha
is.
conf like what was illustrated a moment ago in that pastebin or whatever tracker, and it has no exports in it. And then it gives Pacemaker control of running Ganesha.
Okay. And that's O telling Ceph Ansible to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Manila manages the exports via Rados objects. Is that right?
It manages the not really. And I think I saw that Romano joined us, so he can correct if I misspeak, but it manages the exports via dbus. It persists the exports in Rados.
Mm-hmm.
And it persists the exports in Rados so that if it is restarted, it can find out what they are and replay them to Ganesha.
Okay.
Is what I say make sense? So it's not using Rados watch URL or something like that. It's using dbus.
Okay. But the dbus is basically just saying reload from Rados? Or is it using dbus to say add this export?
It's using dbus. It runs a dbus command that refers to a local file, pulls the contents out of the file.
But it's not part of the ganesha.conf file itself.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's not part of the ganesha.conf file itself, but it's a different.
It's not part of the file that sits there on the host when Ganesha starts. It's part of the Ganesha's configuration in memory, as I understand it. So yes, so the little file, it makes a little temporary file that is referred to in dbus command. The dbus command does not refer to a Rados object. Manila will pull in that rate when it starts up. It will look at the previous exports by pulling them out of Rados. But I believe the dbus mechanism today is ignorant of Rados itself.
So dbus is related to NFS v3, and we don't support NFS v3 anymore. It was deprecated.
We don't use NFS v3 either, so I don't know the history on that, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but empirically, and the solution came to us from I say you folks, but a combination of Ganesha and Ceph people. We run with NFS v4.1 only. And 4.1 plus only. And we do use dbus, and it works.
Okay, so if just thinking here, like the minimum viable short-term fix for this, if we go from Ceph Ansible to cfdm, it's just to fill the gap that Ceph Ansible played, right? Where O could even like deploy ganeshas the way that Ceph Ansible did, and then nothing else would have to change. That might be the...
Yeah, this could be a solution. I think we creating a consistent configuration file for Ganesha, like easy from zero point of view, because we already collect the operators input, so we have all the variables set, and creating the systemd unit the same way Ceph Ansible did. It's the fastest solution, I guess, right now for the short term. I think the cfdm team should double check and verify that it's this kind of work is consistent with your vision, at least for we're talking about the short term. But I don't know, that's all. I think this could be enough to have this component working the same way possible and maintaining this backward compatibility.
It seems like there's going to be some... It seems like we're really close to having everything in place for the long-term situation on the Ceph side. Like we have a little bit of work to do on the manager NFS module, and that's basically it. And then there's on the Manila side, there's a whole bunch of hopefully code simplification that would just make it all the APIs to add and remove exports and to create and destroy clusters. And then like you should like have like this much code go down to hopefully this much code. And so my sense is that we should try to get there as quickly as possible, but that we need a transition. Like we need to convert the legacy exports, basically, right? We need to go have something that finds all those old objects and puts them into the new thing. They'll probably be in a totally different pool. So probably just having a one-shot thing that just copies them all over as part of like the upgrade path be the way to go.
That seems reasonable. And we do rediscover the exports currently when Manila restarts, so that would be a natural place to do the upgrade. It's just, it's not that it's conceptually daunting to us. There's just some logistics. OSP moves slowly, moving upstream to downstream takes time and so on. So I as much as I would love to wave my hands and say we can just skip this, try, just see if we could get there somehow. I do think we're going to need this compatibility path is in addition to upgrade.
So I guess okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's really my question. Like, I'm not sure this part. I'm not sure what that was. Little here, but
the thing is, if we deploy Ganesha manually independent of cfdm, like as it is right now, right? We need to configure Ganesha in a way that it's able to cluster.
That we need to what?
It needs to be able to talk to the cluster. And it needs to be properly deployed. And I don't think we can use Ceph Ansible to deploy.
I guess it can talk to the cluster, because we, as far as I know, we provide the ceph.conf, which is rendered according to some inputs and contains the monitors, mounts, EPs, and we already have the Manila keyring, which is used to connect to the cluster for both internal or external. Let's say that the cluster is logically external. all times. So
and you need to deploy minimal ganesha.conf.
Yeah.
Or pass ganesha.conf.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, I don't know anything about O, so I don't know if it makes sense to have O do that directly, or if it makes sense to have a new Ansible playbook that it uses in place of Ceph Ansible. Like cfdm Ansible could have a rule to do that.
I think in theory, we already have some code in place in O Ansible that is able to deploy several Ceph daemons, and NFS is one of them. So having a couple of different tasks that configure the same way of Ceph Ansible, the Ganesha daemons, I think it's okay for O from O side. And then we can start working on the long-term solution. That should be the Manila goal for the next cycle.
So it'd really be this one. Short-term option number 1, make O Ansible, deploy Ganesha pacemaker the way that Ceph Ansible did.
Yeah.
Because I think that seems the simplest thing, because you basically just need to do make it do exactly what it used to do. Like it can be the same conf file that we used to do. Like the hard part is like making sure that you have the right ceph.conf from a cfdm.
And I said that O could do that because I saw analyzing this kind of scenario, I saw many problems in the cfdm context, and assuming we can solve the networking binding and the configuration file, we still have cfdm deploying and owning this component. And I'm not sure that Peacemaker is happy when a different orchestration tool is owning the units. I don't know, but I think this is the most viable solution for the short term.
We're going to have this migration problem anyway. Even if we could magically have everything you have ready today for us to build on, we still going to have our customers who are using it today who have to upgrade. So we're going to need some playbook or something that will move people from the old way to the new way. Just for existing customers. So this is just an intermediate step so we can get all the pieces in place and be off of Ceph Ansible for our upcoming release.
Yeah, I guess the question in my mind is if we have tomorrow or whatever, in a week from now, if we had all the pieces in place for the long-term stuff, I guess you still have all the Manila changes to make to actually utilize that, and the migration code to do. Is there any world in which we skip this short-term option, or is that a necessary piece?
I think it's necessary. I think there is an impact on the Manila code base, and it requires times. I think 1 or 2 cycles. I don't know, but I think the short-term solution is necessary. We cannot skip it. We cannot escape for this. From this.
Okay, but to be clear, O Ansible is then going to deploy Ganesha how Ceph Ansible did, and not how cfdm does. Right.
It'll be like basically a lateral move with no changes from what was happening before, so nothing should break.
Yeah, so you're going to not leverage cfdm in order to deploy Ganesha, but you're deploying it like Ceph Ansible.
Right. The goal is having at the end of this execution the same pieces provided by Ceph Ansible. So you have a different path because it's a different code base, of course, that you can, of course, validate. But the goal is the same. So you end up having the same thing Ceph Ansible produces.
Perfect.
Right, and this will give us a position from which we can work on the migration path without Ceph Ansible in play. So we can go on and say OSP 17 has no more Ceph Ansible dependency. We're just using Ceph Atom instead of Ceph Ansible, but we're also using little playbook in Triple O or whatever that got pulled out of Ceph Ansible in the time for the interim.
But you still need to.
And the intention is to throw that away. Go ahead.
I have a big latency here? I guess so, right? Sorry. So you still need to migrate from Ceph Ansible to cfdm. So you still need Ceph Ansible to execute the adoption playbook.
That's right. That's right. Now, are you saying that a portion of that adoption playbook will move Ganesha into the new way?
It's weird because Ceph Ansible is taking half of its stuff and giving it to cfdm, and then this Ganesha piece that's already deployed needs to be taken over by below.
Yeah, I think we should handle this part together with the Ceph Ansible team, like we did in the past for the rolling update path we had in Triple O. I don't know, without skipping the Ganesha part, but handling in the proper way for Triple O. We already did these kind of things. Julio, go ahead.
Hey, sorry, Francesco, didn't want to stop. Maybe we can skip it. When you said without skipping, I was thinking maybe we can skip.
We can skip
in the adoption
and handle it in a different way.
I don't know. Handle it in a different way.
I'm not familiar with the adoption playbook and the adoption steps, but probably we can think about skipping the Ganesha part. Or I think the rolling update playbook is also to change containers, and I don't know the details, but I'm not sure we can just skip that playbook, but we can handle it the same way we did with the file store to Blue Store migration or other kind of infrastructure playbooks from Ceph Ansible. I don't know. There are several options.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm fuzzy about how exactly this transition path with the Ceph Ansible, the flow Ansible, and how that ownership of the existing deployed Ganesha daemon will transition. But I think that's something to work out with the Ansible on the Ansible side. On the cfdm side, we just need to make sure that this manager NFS interface that we're putting together has everything that we need.
I guess in theory, as soon as you land it, people like on the Manila team could start using it to have Manila do things the new way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we can start working in upstream Manila, independent of Triple O, independent of Ceph Ansible, just to make sure that we can update exports via Ceph Atom and even play with the lifecycle management from Manila if we want. And those we're very excited about it. So we will try to press ahead on that front. And if there's some kind of impedance mismatch or something we haven't understood, we should be able to discover that relatively early.
Right. And we're pretty convinced there's no way you can get that done to do the new thing on day one with 17. We need this to cover us in the middle. I think we've been over that a couple times, but just asking another way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that you should think about, because I have a feeling that the Manila changes to use the export API are going to make the driver vastly simpler, and so it might be less work. If you can do it quickly, it'd be much less work.
I keep waking up in the middle of the night in the last couple of weeks. Or weeks right away. So we're motivated to do that. I just don't think it's responsible at this point to leave people thinking that we will be able to shortcut it. we're going to start upstream. We would need to talk product managers in the back ports and stuff, but we can't do that until we have something working end to end and understand. But yes, if I'm all for simplifying and cutting out throwaway code. If there's a way we can do that, but I just don't want us to plan, leave this meeting saying it's our record for the pets.
Yeah.
That's the battle plan. Pardon the military analogy here, but I don't think it's a responsible plan. It's a stretch thing we can try to achieve.
So the Triple O team could go with the stopgap, and the Manila team can go with the new way, and no work will be thrown away. And if we're fortunate enough to go to the new way, we can just do it. But if it doesn't happen, we have the insurance.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. So Sebastian, I think that basically means that this NFS export, fleshing out that interface to include all the things, we should do that.
Yeah, but then that's the long-term phase, right? So for now, we're not going to make use of it.
Well, that's what we're saying. Like, if as soon as we land that, then the Manila team can start making the changes to consume it.
Mm.
And if the stars align, then we can make that transition sooner rather than later.
As far as I understood, Varsha, the NFS module actually supports more than what's possible to do when calling export create. So from a feature side, it's already capable of doing more, including the client IPs and stuff, but not user-friendly from NFS.
Yeah, I think you can inject a blob of Ganesha config.
Yeah, I think it's even JSON. You can even inject JSON.
What I saw was you inject JSON as if it were being fed to the board or something. Is that correct?
Yeah. And then it's getting rendered as a Ganesha configuration. So it's my understanding that it's just a matter of making the CLI a bit more user friendly. But that shouldn't block anything. It's just instead of having one command, you need to do two commands, right? First one is NFS export create, and the second one is NFS export update -I, and then the JSON blob stuff.
We can do it. We can do it in an ugly way and then a simpler way too. I mean, I don't. I don't see a. I mean, it would be desirable to have a nice, simple interface that's as nice as the rest of the stuff you're developing, but doesn't mean we can't do it with a couple of calls and making some JSON or something in the short run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you just change two commands to one command.
Yeah, but we're not blocking each other.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good. Okay.
I feel like this was the missing meeting, so thank you. Glad we have a plan.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right.
I think we can skip other topics for now. Right? Or do we still want to talk about OSDs? I don't know.
I'm not familiar with what this FQDN issue is.
This is one thing I think that we can talk tomorrow about that.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
Okay.
then I guess that's it for today. Thank you.
Actually, one last thing, Sebastian.
Yes.
Just that one ticket that came up on chat. Am I right in understanding it's just that the port change, right? That was all that happened.
If it's just a port change, yeah. I guess it's too late, right? But for future updates, we need to kind of think about breaking changes, even though it doesn't seem to look like a breaking change, right? But by changing the default port, we are actually doing a breaking change.
Yeah, I don't actually remember changing the default port. I just know that the default port now is 80 or 443, and it used to be 7280. So that was an accident. But we should probably just make sure we understand what version he was upgrading from, and we should have him dump his service spec so we can see what it used to be, and then just add something to the upgrade notes.
Yeah, I think I saw the traceback in the in the tautology log file. The same traceback.
Okay.
So I think it waits a few times. I'm seeing the traceback maybe 5 to 10 times, and then it suddenly disappears and everything works. At least in tautology, even though the LCW might be listening on a different port then.
That sounds like it might be something else going on. Okay. All right.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yep. See you tomorrow. Bye. Or
Bye.
next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.